Brilliant.
Okay. Hi, Eimer Mcbride, author of Girls Half Formed Thing, who's giving a public reading this evening at the Arena Theatre at Wolverhampton University, and has just done a fantastic class for the first year students studying her novel. Welcome to Wolverhampton.
Thank you very much.
How is it to be described as a genius in the public press?
Surprising when it happened, and flattering, obviously. But, I think, for instance, when Anne Enright used that term in her review, she was also trying to be provocative and make a statement about the way female writers are described or not described. And also, I think, it's a term about someone operating at the edge of something, that's all.
I think that's absolutely true. But there is a critical vocabulary that differs for female writers. It seems like critics really haven't caught up with attitudes that most of the rest of the population hopefully have, haven't they?
I think certainly the attitude towards female writers tends to be very condescending, and that also subjects that are often of preoccupation to women are seen as infantile or secondary or unworthy of attention.
There's this phrase that you quite often see in bookshops or online books tagged as women's issues, for instance.
Yes.
And I always wonder what issues aren't everybody's. Maybe there are things experienced by one sex or the other, but surely they're all of interest and concern.
Well, absolutely. I think really, apart from gynecology and issues relating to such matters, I can't imagine what women's issues are.
Can I move on to the question of, have you always been a writer, or was the label something that gradually became one that suited you?
Well, I always wrote. I wrote from childhood on, but I did initially want to be an actress and pursued that. And I didn't write my first book until I was 27, and it certainly wasn't until I was finished that I felt I could call myself a writer. And then with the difficulty of getting published, I stopped feeling as though I had the right to call myself a writer for quite a long time as well.
Yes, it took 9 years for the world to catch up, I guess. Would you have carried on writing even if publication had never happened?
Well, I did carry on writing. About 3 years in, I realised that I would have to make the decision whether or not I was a writer, and that being a writer was different to being a published author. And realised that was a distinction that I had to make and could make, and that I would continue to write even if I would be unpublished, even if I would be seen as a failed writer or feel that I was a failed writer.
Yeah, you talked about, when we saw the students, you talked about the compulsion to write, and that's something that drives you. You have to write.
Yeah, why else would you do it? It certainly doesn't make your life any easier in many ways. And I think it's important to understand, even in a lot of the dull work of just sitting down at the desk and writing, that's where it's found, that's where it begins to work, and that's what you must always be going towards. It's
hard labour, isn't it, to some extent?
Well, it's not breaking rocks, but it's certainly about doing work rather than feeling inspired to write, or feeling as though the spirit has overtaken you in some way.
Are you a self-editor, or were publishers editing you? How do you find the process of editing?
No, I by and large have, with the Girl It's a Half-Formed Thing, self-edited that, and I edited really on a daily basis when I was writing it. When it finally was picked up for publication, Gallybeggar did ask me to change the end and to change the beginning, and I didn't change the end, but I did rewrite some of the beginning because I agreed with their concerns, and I still agree now with that. But I never really had any kind of line editing process with them, and the copy editing process was obviously fairly tedious for all of us.
Yeah, bound to be. But the actual process of editing seems to have been fairly humane then.
Yes, I think I was lucky. I think they felt that the book was in good enough shape by itself. They agreed with my choices, and I was pretty, after 9 years, I was pretty set in my ways of what it was going to be, one way or the other.
Do you recognise your own work in the interpretations that you're finding in reviews and online commentary and discussions with audiences? I'm
certainly surprised by some of the interpretations and occasionally outraged, but frequently delighted and flattered as well. I think having waited so long for publication, it's been a very interesting process to see it go out into the world, to see readers' reaction. And I really enjoyed the last year being able to go out to readers and read and to discuss the book and see what people think.
And you've attracted an audience worldwide to some extent. Do you find that audiences in different places or cultures pick up on different aspects of the book?
I certainly was very conscious when I was in Australia of a lot of the female interviewers really wanting to get into discussions of the nitty-gritty sexual aspects of the book, which has been avoided a lot in the UK. And that was very interesting. And also the fact that in the US, for instance, it's been mostly reviewed by men was quite an interesting experience and slightly unexpected.
Yeah, the James Woods New Yorker review seemed pretty shocking because he's the biggest beast in critical reviewing, and it just seems like a deeply misogynistic set of assumptions that his reading is based on.
Well, I think some parts of the review were very insightful and I agreed with. Some I was taken aback by. Certainly his description of the girl's raped by her uncle as being the beginning of a relationship with him, or describing it in terms of a relationship rather than an act of abuse, surprised me.
Yeah, that's the bit I thought was utterly shocking, that you could imagine such an imbalance of power producing a relationship. Why do you think that British, at least reviewers, maybe not audiences, why are they squeamish about sex or avoid it?
I don't know if they are particularly squeamish about it or if they just find discussion about the form of the language more interesting. I think this maybe goes back to what we were talking about in terms of female writers, and that perhaps in the desire to talk about the book in an academic way, they feel that talking about all the squishy, unpleasant physical aspects of it somehow let it down. I'm not sure.
Great. Thank you very much for your time and good luck with tonight's presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eimear.